Hey everyone, it's Time Spiraled here. We're in the finals of MSEM's Grand Prix Fujisawa here. I'm going to just give a quick good luck, have fun to our finalists. We got a really interesting match going on here. We've got Amethyst rocking Jeskai Zirrat versus Test, who's been on Bant Mable control. Both of these players have made it all the way to the finals. Both are rocking some really cool cards. Over here, we've got Garth being mentioned here, which is one of our format's unique companion mechanics using a mechanic called First Mate. We're going to have Test, who's on seeding, so Test is going to choose to be on the play here. We're going to see if players are bringing in their First Mates. While we do that, we're going to get a chance to look at our players' opening hands. So Amethyst already got the deck's namesake out. We've got Zirrat. Does a very interesting Murktide impression, costing one less for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard, and able to just churn out an absolute board of 2/2 flyers. And the -2 isn't bad either, bringing back a non-land permanent, and drawing a card is not horrible. Over on Test side, we've got one of the key cards of the deck, Total Surveillance, which, much like Zirrat, is able to get a lot of flying presence on the board as long as Test can keep casting flash and instant spells, which is the entire deck. So Test is keeping 7, but is deciding on what card to port out if they want to keep their First Mate. So we're going to see those being brought out here. At the same time, Amethyst has one of my favorite cards in the format. It's Isochron Wand. If you know the namesake from Canon Magic, you'll kind of understand where this card comes in. You exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value 1 from your hand, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you'll just keep casting copies. So you can put things such as a Monkey Shines, you can put Creative Salvage here, a lot of things you can do to go up on cards. And if you find a burn spell, nothing says you can't just stick it under there and slowly dome your opponent to death. Test also rocking Prodigious Panya, one of the better cards in these sort of flash builds. The ability to flash it into your opponent's end step and then Great Escapade on your turn lets you have a pretty powerful flying beater. And our players here are just doing a quick discussion on their First Mates about whether you decide after mulligans or during mulligans. So Tess is going to choose to keep, and Amethyst is also going to keep 7. So no players are going to start with less cards in their hand. So there we see our First Mates being brought out. We've got Mable replacing the Cane Dancer. Makes perfect sense. Cane Dancer didn't have any targets here. Mable is a 2/2 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and draw a card. Now, for those of you who don't know First Mate, it is essentially similar to Companion in the sense that it has to have a requirement to be added to your decks, or at least your sideboard as your First Mate. You can only have 1. But you swap it with a card in your opening hand, so it's not an extra card, it is just a guaranteed card in your hand, which, even though Mable might seem a little, like, at first glance, you go, you know, flash, gain 2 life, draw a card for 2/2 for 3, doesn't seem super exciting, but guaranteeing that you have that body in your hand is actually really important. So Amethyst chooses not to get Garth, but I am going to mouse over just so we can get a chance to look at Garth real quick. Garth wants your starting deck to have no creature cards, and is a 2/4 pro is for 3. Whenever Garth attacks, you look at the top card. If it's an instant or sorcery, you may cast it. You still have to pay the costs, obviously. Test starting us off with the basic island here. Just going to pass it over. It doesn't have a turn 1 play. Plenty of lands, though, to fuel what's coming up next, and we can always flash in a Prodigious Panya at the end of Amethyst's turn, which I believe we're going to see right here. Amethyst putting in a Magmatic Torrent, paying the 2 life, one of our fetch lands here in the format. The 2 life means you get to have it untapped, and going to be able to, you know, fix that mana. Only 2 lands, though. Spell Pierce drawn from Amethyst, so let's keep going. Test swinging in with Prodigious Panya, dealing a point of damage. Amethyst slowly ticking down, but, you know, plenty of life. Test drawing a really powerful catch-all answer in End of All Things, able to exile an activated ability, triggered ability, or non-land permanent. And you can notice the Coalesce ability, which pretty much just reads flashback, but then also the instant, in this case, comes back on the field as the creature form. So very strong mechanic. We've got the Magmatic Torrent was crapped for a Forgotten Step here, and then Creative Salvaged. Pitched the Reconsider to drop some cards here. I'm going to leave the Amethyst Graveyard here so everyone can just keep an eye on that. We're at 2 instants and sorceries in the yard, so Zirrat already a 5-drop. And I'm sure that's just going to keep ticking down. So Amethyst also drew into Embodied Soul, another payoff for this kind of deck. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you upgrade it with either Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, or Lifelink. Eventually, you can get all 4. And then by paying white, you can make it into a 0/0 that has +1/+1 for each different kind of counter on it. So 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, and eventually a 4/4. Amethyst paying 2 here, going to play out the Isochron Wand. I would imagine Monkey Shines is the correct pick here. Oh, I guess Creative Salvage is also fine. I mean, you'll discard non-lands and draw 2. Monkey Shines would also draw, and you can put cards in the bin, but, you know, both are very good. Test cracking over for a forest at the end here. Very safe mana base. Knows that Amethyst is rocking main board non-basic land destruction. Both players have access to each other's deck in the Grand Prix format. Plays out the Pool of Light. It's going to be untapped since Test controls a basic island, and now has the 3 mana necessary to run out either Mable, Total Surveillance, but in this case, End of All Things is simply going to take out Wand and Creative Salvage. Nice little 2-for-1 there. Chips in for 1. Forgotten Step here, costing a little bit of life until Amethyst can find their second basic here, running out Embodied Soul, and then going to cast the Monkey Shines to get Embodied Soul's first counter here. Drew into one of those land destructions I was talking about, Imperial Siege. You might notice it's a very good land removal. Unfortunately, it only hits non-basics, so could definitely be pointed at the Pool of Light, but Test is holding on to an Ocean Monastery and an Ares Pillar in hand, so I'm going to be relatively not too bothered. I mean, a turn down is still a turn down, but not going to be backbreaking. Drew into an Angelic Barracks. Try lands with the option to bolt yourself if you really need that mana this turn. If you've been following along, Modern Horizons 3 has shown that sometimes it's perfectly fine to shock yourself if the mana needs it. So, Tess is going to untap and draw. Drew into Cosmic Sinkhole. Very flexible counterspell that can hit you either at 1, at 3, or at 5, depending on the amount of colors spent to cast it, but that double X means that the only modes are 1, 3, and 5. Bit of a nerf to what it used to be, but the flexibility is still there, and the card still sees a great amount of play. So, dropping in an Ocean Monastery, going to pay the 2 life, wants that mana untapped. A lot of 3 mana cards end, plus the 1 is pretty important here. Swings in for 1 with Panya. Let's keep in mind that Great Escapade is going to be live next turn, which is going to give an extra turn and turn for just Penya into a 4/4. If you're not paying attention, by the way, to the type line, the creature is the little mouse on top of the owl's head, and not the owl itself. So it is a mouse warrior. Panya just, you know, rides along on friends. So passing the turn, all the mana in the world open, everything in Test's hand is able to be played at instant speed. That pillar is going to come in tapped, however, next turn, which means we're not going to have a Panya on turn. Well, even less here if we're going straight for Imperial Siege. Let's see. Yep, Test is going to run out Cosmic Sing. Oh, never mind, I'm wrong here. Test is going to run out Total Surveillance. That Spell Pierce in Amethyst's hand is going to get Cosmic Sinkhole, perhaps? I see we're cracking the fetch for Sedate Tundra. And there we go. Cosmic Sinkhole into Spell Pierce. Loses the land, but gets Total Surveillance. So, perfectly fine. We are up to 3 instants and sorceries for Zirrat. Zirrats are now costing 4. So getting closer. One more land could mean a Zirrat on the following turn, but we're passing it back over here to Test. Untapping with Total Surveillance. Very strong. Of course, it draws a card when it enters, so replacing itself. We drew a Mirror Gate and a basic. Getting a little land heavy here, but able to dedicate a turn to dropping this Ares Pillar is quite nice. It can eventually become a pretty solid beater in its own right. Panya just continuously chipping away for one here. There's a Sear Flesh over on Amethyst's hands. Could get rid of it. Right now, Test is out of counterspells. Not that Amethyst knows that. So we're going to see how this turn is going to play out. Tapping 2. Oh, you know what? Hold up. Look at me not paying actual attention. This was tucked in a little far. Sorry, we've seen Monkey Shine, Siege, and everything. So, sorry. We've got Zirrat at 2 mana. Zirrat's coming down this turn. My apologies, everyone. Zirrat's going to immediately uptick, create the first 2/2 elemental. So, of course, they have the, when they become the target of a spell, they get sacked. But if you're throwing removal and stuff, especially spells at these illusions, they're probably dying in the first place. Tess is going to run out Mable, gets a drone off of Total Surveillance. Mable's going to enter, give a little life, draw a card. We're going to pass over here to Test's turn. Prodigious Panya is going to be live if we drop that 5th land here. The blue elemental illusion, of course, could always block the 4/4, so not necessarily the most back-breaking extra turn that we could have. Drew into Vortex Vitae, so it's a quench that has an optional mode. You can cycle it for 3, and instead of giving you a card, you get 2 tapped 1/1 colorless elemental creature tokens. I believe all life cycles are the same cost. So let's see what the plan here is. The lands aren't great. Playing out the Shifting Glade as our untapped land here. All the colors of mana that Test could ever need. The question is what to do with them. So another option could be simply animating Ares Pillar. But at the same time, with the Vortex Vitae in hand, might be something that you want to keep around. We'll see what happens. Alright, willing to trade in the Mable for the 2/2, it seems. Which is totally fine. Cards are going to crash. We still have the 1 mana open on Amethyst's side, which has Lifelink, First Strike, Flying, and Vigilance at this time. So, something to keep in mind. We're going to activate the tail, get an extra turn. Maybe the top card is going to make a big difference. So, the tail has been told. We untap, we draw. Oh. At upkeep, we're a 4/4, yeah. And we've got a Veilborn Meddler. Very nice card. It's a flash 1/1 that grows whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, and also it counters a spell if its mana value is less than or equal to Veilborn Meddler's power. So the issue here with Embodied having all the keywords is First Strike, Flying, and Lifelink. Make it a very nasty blocker here. I'm just going to opt to pass. Veilborn Meddler and Vortex Vitae means that a lot more can be countered here. And yeah, sometimes the extra turn just has to be the card and the resources that you need to contest what's on the board. Of course, Zirrat's going to be able to keep pumping out 2/2s if they need to. There's also, of course, the bounce option, but not that you're going to want to put Panya in hand. Alright, here we go. The Vigilance means that, you know, swinging in is pretty correct. The Lifelink means that just blocking with these 1/1 drones is going to slowly put you back. I'm going to cash in the Panya. And, yeah. We're holding on to some removal in hand now. We've got an Event Horizon, which can pretty much exile most things on the board here. Not a lot of non-land permanents being played out, but in this case, Total Surveillance... No, we're up to 3 permanents. So, Event Horizon can now remove Total Surveillance if need be. This is the greatest number controlled by a single player. But yeah, pumping out the 2/2s, Embodied, still able to mount a defense here. We're in a rather tough spot, but don't forget, I mean, As long as Test can keep putting in work towards the total surveillance, we can keep blocking, but at one point, the 4 life return is just going to run away with quite a bit. We got a Wayfarer Shrine coming out here. Can crack for any basic land as long as you pay 1 life. It's a Prismatic Vista, just predates it by a few years. So I'm cracking some lands going up to mountains. Let's see if we see an event horizon being pointed at total surveillance here. Seeing 2 lands being tapped. Yep. Of course, Tess has the Vortex Vitae, able to say nope. Gets another drone. 1 more blocker. Alright. We're back to Amethyst's turn. Drawing into a Monkey Shines. That Monkey Shine is going to be able to draw some cards, but in response, because it's a spell with mana value 1, Veilborn Meddler is going to be cast. And I'm going to say no to that. Doesn't want it digging any deeper. Now, of course, Veilborn Meddler can grow pretty big, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see a Sear Flesh taking care of the Veilborn. It's one of the few things that could eventually get big enough that Embodied Soul might be concerned, but the fact that a second Zirrat in hand is definitely of concern here, because even if you get rid of the first one, just the next one's just going to come right back out and continue going. Sear Flesh being a sorcery, I'm sure we're seeing the attacks going off first. That's perfectly happy to chunk 2 into the 2/2 and then block again. That's putting our life totals back to where we were. It's a lot of work undone on Test side. Here we go. I'm assuming this is the Sear Flesh for the Veilborn Meddler. And there we go. Test really running on empty here. I'm going to see the... oh, now End of All Things is a good draw here. We're going to get back to having a 1/1. End of All Things can take out... I'm assuming Embodied Soul is the scarier of the two, because that's what's giving the clock. You can deal with some 2/2s eventually. We'll see. We got Mirror Gate coming out. Mirror Gate is an interesting land hate card, I'd like to say, where you get to name another card, another land, as long as it's non-basic, and both players will pick a color, and the lands are just locked to being able to play those colors. So in this case, Test by naming green, Amethyst is going to name blue, so Mirror Gate is now a green-blue land, which means Angelic Barracks is as well, so it no longer taps for white or for red. Which is important, because that was the second blue source if you got the Zirrat, but it does mean if ever, for some reason, you lose... oh, anyway, drawing an Ocean Monastery sort of solves that problem. I'm going to close here the graveyard so we can clean up a little bit on the board. We now know that Zirrat's got all the instants and sorceries in the yard that we need. Nothing that can come back. So a thing to remember is that the End of All Things that are in Test's graveyard, the Coalesce is for 8, and we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So starting from next turn, these End of All Things are actually going to come back as 5/4s. So I'd like to assume that the End of All Things in Test's hand is going to take out the Embodied Soul, drastically removes a clock, and then the 5/4s become a little more of a problem when it comes to these 2/2s. Of course, casting them from the yard also is going to trigger total surveillance. So by doing that, we're going to slowly have a board that can contest this first Zirrat, and then if you can get the second, you're looking kind of good. Choosing to minus here, not returning a non-land permanent, which makes sense. You don't want total surveillance back in your opponent's hand. Looking to dig for cards rather than 2/2 bodies. We've got Creative Salvage here. Hold up. I'm just going to ask... I'm going to ask them to mark the correct colors. Just to solve that. Perfect. I'm going to reduce some chances that mistakes are made. So, paying the white, Embodied Soul is animated and is going to attack. I'd like to think that the correct play is End of All Things, because regardless of whether or not it resolves, you're getting your total surveillance drone out. So here we're going to see Creative Salvage. We're going to be digging for potential answer. Pitches the Zirrat. Interesting. Draws lands and into Prognosticate. That is not great for Amethyst here. If that first Zirrat is dealt with, that's a bit of an issue. Prognosticate, very cool design. You scry one, draw a card, but then you scry one again. Being sorcery speed means it's just not, better opt. Artwork is great. The set it came in is fantastic. So, chipped of 2 damage off of the Elemental Illusion. And now, I'm going to fire off a Prognosticate. And now we've got 2 End of All Things in the yard. And, of course, being instant means that you can cast them at instant speed, and they will enter tapped. So the first one can take out the Zirrat. We're just drawing into lands here over on Amethyst's side. We've gone from a very solid board and pieces of removal, just picking it apart here. We're going to see the Wayfarers try and get cracked here for a Plains, the only basic that was missing here on the field. And we're going to untap, and yeah, things are going to start leaning back onto test side. I'm assuming, considering the fact that they are instant speed, we're not necessarily going to see a main, but at the same time, 1 land up, if you know your opponent, yeah, sometimes it's just better to fire off when your opponent's lands are down. End of All Things coming out, exiling Zirrat, getting a drone, and Amethyst concedes here. Out of options. So we're going to see sideboards coming up. I'm sure it won't take too long. Going to give you a chance to look at the sideboards here in both players. Of course, the Mable here. This is Test's deck. We've got copies of Powder Scatter that could come in. Sebring Null Mages. Invalidates. Reminiscence. And Still the Pandemonium. Feel free to pause if you're watching this on YouTube to read the individual cards. But sometimes sideboarding doesn't take too long, and I want to make sure that we don't miss much of the match. Alright, I'm just going to load real quick Amethyst's deck so we can check out the sideboard there. We have the Garth. We have Entellan Deep Storage, which gives instants and sorceries in your graveyard flashback. We've got Anti-Magic, Fiery Burst, Forbidden Treasures. Not horrible against those End of All Things here. Imperial Claims and Spell Pierces. 2 more copies to supplement the ones on the board. Amethyst is ready. No longer ready. We'll give them a few more moments here. So both being relatively spell heavy, but the board being still rather important with the 1/1s that you've got. I'm wondering if we're going to see the other copy of Fiery Burst. We've already got, 2 in the main. Honestly, the decks felt pretty fine. Just getting rid of that Zirrat, looking for a solution here meant, you were empty. But at the same time, once your opponent's at 8 mana, and they're going to start chaining those End of All Things, you're in a tight spot. So we see Anti-Magic being brought in from the sideboard. Makes a lot of sense. They're very similar in terms of colors. And on test side, nothing here was in the sideboard. So Amethyst, of course, choosing to go first, going to make a relatively big difference. Starting with keeping this hand. Barracks, Nebula, Mountain. Pretty much means you got all your colors covered. Creative Salvage lets you start pitching to fill for Zirrat, and then Anti-Magic handles something that you need. Test has chosen to, I believe, go down to 6, and then is bringing in Mable, putting back once again the Cane Dancer. Not a lot of targets for it here, so Still running with Total Surveillance, Prodigious Panya, Mable. Very similar to the first. We see Garth here. Garth is going to come in and putting back an Angelic Barracks. So we're going to be on 2 lands rather than the 3. So we still have the Panya turn 1, or of course out-of-body experience if something really scary should come up. I'm going to start with the Creative Salvage right off the bat. I'm assuming Event is the one being pitched. Okay, good. Drawing 2, Monkey Shines and Forbidden Treasure. Good. So I'm happy to see that one of the cards that I thought might be brought in was indeed brought in. Forbidden Treasure able to handle those really strong Coalesce finishers. So Nebula of Empty Gold, I'm going to have to name at least 2 colors. So it's either a Shockland or up. So we're going to pay 3 life. Going to get the full Jeskai here. It's going to be important to start filling up that graveyard, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm going to just park it right here. We're at 2. Pitching the Monkey Shines, so that's going to be 3. And we're going to be drawing 2 more cards here. I'm assuming looking for at least 1 land for the following turns would probably be nice. Getting an early Garth can make a big difference. And a 2/4 is rather decent. Okay. We're up to 4 in the yard already. That means Zirrat's already at 3 mana. Cracking the Wayfarer's Shrine, found an island, played the Panya out. Gonna start clicking for 1. Second land means that we've got out-of-body experience and Cosmic Sinkhole up, depending on the needs. Very good to go with these basics, knowing that Imperial Siege is definitely still a very real threat here. Firing off the Monkey Shines. Monkey Shines letting you look at the top 2 cards of your library. So either both go in the yard or back on top in any order. In this case, binning a bunch of cards, drawing into that 3rd land. And we are at the full 6, so Zirrat could technically come out here. The one issue you might notice is we don't have a double blue, which is why I'm assuming we're digging so heavily. And having all these blue cards here is a bit problematic because you're also not digging any deeper with that. So not having a non-basic here made a big difference. That Imperial Siege just was stuck in the hand an extra turn. Shrine being played out. Perfectly safe against removal, can always crack it at a target. And now between out-of-body, Cosmic, Mable, and Total Surveillance, a lot of options. Going to just chip in for 1 more here with Panya, and then I'm assuming we're just going to throw it back. Creative Salvage in hand, that's not bad because that is one of your ways of digging that is not blue. So I'm assuming we're going to see a Creative Salvage being played here. The question is, what is going to be thrown? Imperial Siege. All right, opts to say, you know what? I'm just not going to hit them. They've got shrines. They're fetching. Digs into Sear Flesh. Digs into Creative Salvage. We could see a second salvage just right off the bat. Really hoping to find that blue land. Being able to do so could mean a Zirrat could come out the same turn since we haven't played a land this turn. But instead, opting to pass. Going to keep the blue open so Forbidden Treasure and Anti-Magic are live. Total Surveillance coming out, and we're going to see, I'm assuming, Anti-Magic being thrown out here. Does not want that value happening here. Tessa's going to untap, draws immediately into another Total Surveillance. So we're going to see the 1 click. I'm wondering if Tessa's going to take the opportunity now that Amethyst is tapped out to resolve the Total Surveillance, keeping the Ocean Monastery perhaps up for either out-of-body experience or Cosmic Sinkhole, depending on what's needed. The fact that Forgotten Step is just slowly clicking away. Alright, opting to pass. Amethyst draws into Angelic Barracks. That's the colors they need. Let's see how it plays down. 3 life is not nothing. It is a decent chunk to have that second blue. But Zirrat, the value that it produces is pretty high. Of course, test is at 4, means that next turn it could be a Prodigious Panya. It might be correct to just, run out Zirrat, get the 2/2, ensure that you have a blocker for the 4/4 that's coming in next turn to protect yourself. Now Test is going to decide. Definitely has the mana to just run out Cosmic Sinkhole here. Zirrat, Amethyst, pardon, doesn't have the 3 mana necessary to pay for that. Pretty rough. No Zirrat, but at the same time on this side, no First Total Surveillance. Of course, we drew into the other one. We're going to see Sear Flesh take out Prodigious Panya, just not wanting to see that turn into a 4/4 with an extra turn. And then we're just going to empty out the hand, Creative Salvage, pitching a Prognosticate, and is just going to draw up 2. Drew into a Fetch Land and a Spell Pierce. Very much tapped out, though. Means Tess has pretty much all the options here. I would assume it's going to be Total Surveillance. Probably want that before your Mable happens. Draws a card, draws another Ocean Monastery. No Coalesces in yard yet, so even though we're slowly climbing up to that 8, as long as they are not showing up, I'm assuming this is going to be a Garth. Going to be run out here. Got to get that body to start producing a little bit of value here. Of course, Test has the out-of-body experience, so we're going to see the Ocean Monastery crack for a Pool of Light, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see OOB go at it, but of course, we have a Magmatic Torrent going to be. So a little counters going on here. I'm wondering if we're going to see it going to be, Spell Pierce. Okay, you want to keep those Forbidden Treasures for the scarier things. So Garth will resolve. Might need a few drones. Oh, well. Right. Every time I say that, we draw into something nice. Bant Command. Fantastic card here. Definitely can do a lot. Going to attack with the 1 in the air. Amethyst is at 6, and there's no life gain in sight, so Tess definitely has a serious advantage here. So, Mystery of the Crashcraft. When it enters, you get a 1/1 alien, and then once you've cast an instant and once you've cast a sorcery, it'll actually flip over to its backside, which is Epsilon Crash Captain, which is a 2/2 that whenever you cast instant or sorcery, you get another alien, and then you can sack some aliens to copy instants and sorceries. So, at start of combat, little things like that, you got to give your opponents a chance to go combat, then attack. So we're going to get Bant Command cast. It's going to get Forbidden Treasured. Just going to remove all the copies of it from hand, library, everything. Gets another drone at least. Alright. Tess is going to reveal the rest of the deck. Reveals that Mable is the only card they have in hand. And we can check real quick to see what else was brought in. Powder Scatterers, Out of Bodies, still the Pandemoniums, yeah. Invalidates, all the counter spells. All right, so exiled all, so not in the yard. Okay, good. So 3 copies of Bant Command in the exile. I'm gonna proceed to cast, and that was 2 instants and sorceries cast here. Or, well, 2 non-creatures. We had Mystery followed by Forbidden Treasure, so I'm going to swing for 4. Little bit scarier. Still has the mana with Forbidden Treasure, so in a desperate move, if you out-of-body experience that Garth, which should not be, okay. Players are on top of things, that's good. So only instant was cast, so sorcery would be what we need to trigger Mystery of the Crash Craft. Let's see what we got here. Swinging in for 2 in the air. Again, no flying blockers means that if Tez can just hold on, even just casting Mable, giving another flying drone, and then resolving out of body will give you the 4 drones that you need. So it might look pretty tight, but we'll see what Garth... Alright, we're doing start of combat again. It's just totally acceptable. Yeah. It's not always easy on a Cockatrice. It's you just got to be willing to, you know, politely ask your opponents to wind back a little bit. So paying 2, Forbidden Treasure is going to get the out of body. We're going to see Mable cast as well here, because if you draw into another counterspell, that could be it. And that is the 4th drone needed. And now that there's all these bodies, you might not be able to swing in with everything. We drew into Wayfarer's Shrine, however, which is probably not the card that Test wanted to see be pulled in. Now we're going to reveal the hands. Gonna fish the other out-of-body experiences. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, full play set. And there we go. We know that it's a Wayfarer Shrine. Alright. Very, very close here. Wait a second. We got Monkey Shines being cast off of Garth. I'm going to take a bit of extra damage because of the cast here. Because it's a sorcery, Mystery of the Crash Craft is flipped into Epsilon. Unfortunately, was not what Amethyst needed. And with that, we have a... yeah, there we go. Next turn with drones and pillar. Yep. So there we go. Whew. Congrats to our 2 players. Making it all the way to the top X is always great. And making it to the finals, absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, digging for the blue sources was really tough here on Amethyst. So, I hope you've appreciated this. Hopefully we'll be back to putting out more videos, whether it's League or Grand Prix in the future. But in this case, you know, congrats to our new GP Fujisawa winner to Test, and hopefully you catch our future videos on YouTube. So have a good one, and see you soon.